Dear friends, this is episode number 104 of CPC. We are dealing with section 9. With this episode, I hope that I will be able to complete the reference to the decisions of the Supreme Court on that point. Now, I would propose to cite a decision, AER 1966 Supreme Court 893. 893. 5 judges Constitution bench. So see, we have referred to 2 or 3 Constitution bench decisions and a 7-judge judgment. Why, in spite of Constitution bench, 7 judges bench was constituted? How they answered it? Even after 7-judge bench, why Constitution benches consider this question? Because of its relevance with respect to different situations. So a particular judgment is an authority for the proposition. That proposition is on the basis of a particular aspect. So another aspect comes, but the core question is whether the bar under section 9 will apply, but in a different context. So therefore the court has to consider it. That is why the different decisions, different aspects have been considered, discussed, and there are hundreds and hundreds of decisions. You may go through it to the extent possible, but I gave only the most relevant decisions. AER 1966 Supreme Court 893, Ram Swaroop and others. Ram Swaroop and others versus Shikhar Chand and another. Shikhar Chand and another. That is under the Rent Control Act, Rent and Eviction Act UP. Jurisdiction of the civil court is excluded in relation to matters covered by orders under section 3(4), orders which are covered by 3, 4 and 16. Paragraph 12. Paragraph 12 and 13. Paragraph 12 and 13. One of the points which is often treated as relevant in dealing with the question about the exclusion of civil court's jurisdiction is whether the special statute which it is urged excludes such jurisdiction has used clear and unambiguous words indicating that intention. Another test which is applied is, does the said statute provide for an adequate and satisfactory alternative remedy to the party that may be aggrieved by the relevant order under its material provisions? Applying these tests, it does appear that the word used in section 3, 4 and 16 are clear. Section 16 in terms provides that the order made shall not be called in question in any court. There is an express provision excluding the civil court's jurisdiction. 3(4) does not expressly, section 3(4) does not expressly exclude the jurisdiction of the civil court. But the other section says that the order shall be final, shall not be called in question in any court. But there is no specific ouster clause. 3(4) does not expressly exclude the jurisdiction of the civil courts, but in the context, the inference that the civil court's jurisdiction is intended to be excluded appears to be inescapable. So one section says that the orders passed by the authority under that act shall be final and shall not be called in question in any court. There is no express provision prohibiting or excluding the jurisdiction of the civil court. But in view of the scheme of that act, the Supreme Court says that the conclusion is inescapable that the civil court's jurisdiction is intended to be excluded. Therefore, we are satisfied, etc., etc. Paragraph 13. In our opinion, I am leaving out 1 or 2 sentences. In our opinion, the bar created by the relevant provisions of the Act, excluding jurisdiction of the Civil Code, cannot operate in cases where the plea raised before the Civil Code goes to the root of the matter and would, if upheld, lead to the conclusion that the impugned order is a nullity. Therefore, the bar created by the relevant provisions of the Act, excluding jurisdiction of the civil courts, cannot operate in cases where the plea raised before the civil court goes to the root of the matter, and if upheld, it would make the impugned order a nullity. Take for instance, then the Supreme Court gives instances. Let us go through those instances. Examples. Normally it is not seen in the Supreme Court judgments, examples are not seen, but here it is. Take for instance, the case of an order purported to have been passed by a district magistrate, who is not a district magistrate in law. Passed by a district magistrate who is not a district magistrate in law. If it is shown by a party impeaching the validity of the order in a civil court that the order was passed by a person who was not a district magistrate, the order in law would be a nullity. The order in law would be a nullity. And such a plea cannot be ruled out on the ground of exclusion of jurisdiction of the civil court. Simply because there is an ouster clause or exclusion of jurisdiction of the civil court does not mean that to show that the order is purportedly passed by a district magistrate, but look at this man, he is not a district magistrate, and therefore the order is completely null and void. It goes to the root of the matter, and therefore it is the civil court who can entertain that plea and decide it. Similarly, if an order granting permission to a landlord is passed by a district magistrate of one district when the property in question is situated in another district outside his jurisdiction, a party would be entitled to urge before a civil court that the permission purported to have been granted by the district magistrate is wholly invalid and a nullity in law. So a permission is to be granted under some provisions of the special statute to the landlord for doing something, but that was granted by the magistrate in a station, while the property is situated in the jurisdiction, within the jurisdiction of a magistrate in B, area B. Therefore, it is completely without jurisdiction. Of course, I have to mention here section 21 of the CPC. That is, the question of territorial jurisdiction must be raised at the first possible opportunity, and if it is not raised at that opportunity, it cannot be raised in appeal or revision. You cannot say that it is a nullity. But that is because of a specific provision in the CPC, and it is a court, whereas this is an authority. A district magistrate gets jurisdiction only in respect of matters with respect to which he is conferred with the jurisdiction. That cannot be equated with a civil court. That is a distinction. So, similarly, if an order granting permission to a landlord is passed by a district magistrate of one district, when the property in question is situated in another district outside his jurisdiction, a party would be entitled to urge before a civil court that the permission purported to have been granted by the district magistrate is wholly invalid and a nullity. Now, let us look at in other way. Let us take it that there is finality, there is an ouster clause, and therefore the civil court will have no jurisdiction. But the order in question was passed by a magistrate who has no jurisdiction. Before whom it should be raised? Before the same magistrate who has no jurisdiction? Then that order is also without jurisdiction. So we have to see the difference between the civil court and quasi-judicial or administrative authorities. That is a distinction. For example, a power of review. A civil court has power of review, but an administrative authority or quasi-judicial authority does not have that power of review unless it is conferred. Even the government gets power to review an order, only it is not purely administrative matters. I am not saying about the quasi-judicial orders. Administrative matters, they may take a decision today, take another decision or modify it. No, that is not. It is affecting two individuals and the decision has quasi-judicial character, affecting the rights of parties. Then a review cannot be had by an authority, quasi-judicial authority, unless that power is available in the special statute. Whereas before the civil court, that power is implicit, need not be conferred. Yes. Let us take another case to illustrate the position. If section 3 had provided that before a district magistrate grants permission to the landlord to sue his tenant, he shall issue notice to the tenant and give him an opportunity to represent his case before the application to the landlord is dealt with on the merits. And in the face of such statutory provision, the district magistrate grants permission ex parte without issuing notice to the tenant in such a case. The failure of the district magistrate to comply with the mandatory provision prescribed in that behalf would render the order passed by him completely invalid, and the plea that an order has been passed by a district magistrate without complying with the mandatory provision of the Act would be open for examination before a civil court. So the district magistrate has to grant permission to a party to do a particular thing. The procedure provides that he shall issue notice to the opposite party, hear him, and then decide to grant or not to grant permission. But the district magistrate did not issue to the other side and granted permission ex parte without hearing the other side, and whether that is whether that act of the district magistrate, whether the district magistrate's order can be protected, taking shelter under the exclusion clause of that special statute. Supreme Court says no, because it is completely invalid, and therefore it can be challenged before the civil court. Without complying with the mandatory would be open to examination before the civil court. Likewise, in the absence of such a statutory provision, if it is held that the proceedings before the appropriate authorities contemplated by section 3 are in the nature of quasi-judicial proceedings, and they must be tried in accordance with the principles of natural justice, and it is shown that in a given case an order has been passed without notice to the party affected by such order, it would be open to the said party to contend that an order passed in violation of the principles of natural justice is a nullity, and its existence should be ignored by the civil court. Such a plea cannot, in our opinion, be excluded by reason of the provisions contained in section so and so, so and so. So I think the position is clear by the illustrations given by the Supreme Court, which is a rare phenomenon in the Supreme Court judgments, because normally they won't. But here it is. Therefore it becomes very easy. Next is AER 1991 Supreme Court 435. Parallel citation 1991 Supplemental 1 SCC 167. Gurbaksh Singh versus the Financial Commissioner and another. Displaced Persons Compensation and Rehabilitation Act 1954. That is a special statute which is in question. That is in Punjab, that there are, say, what is that name of that? evacuee property. Evacuee property that is available in Punjab, that is border areas, between Pakistan and India. Displaced Persons Eviction Act. There are two acts with respect to that. That property is called evacuee property. And in respect of that special statute, the question arose, and the discussion is in paragraph 19. Section 14 of the Act provides for constitution of a compensation pool. Section 15 exempts the property in compensation pool from process of courts. Section 20 empowers the managing officer or managing corporation to transfer any property within the compensation pool by sale of such property to a displaced person or any association of displaced persons, whether incorporated or not, or to any person, whether the property is sold by public auction or otherwise. Under subsection 2 of that section, every managing officer or managing corporation selling any immovable property by public auction under subsection 1 shall be deemed to be a revenue officer within the meaning of section 89 of the Indian Registration Act. This is the scheme of the Act. Under section 27 of the Act, save as otherwise expressly provided in the Act, every order made by any officer or authority under the Act, including a managing corporation, shall be final and shall not be called in question in any court by way of appeal or revision, or in any original suit, application or execution proceedings. So, all pervasive, not only saying that the civil court has no jurisdiction, it is not only saying that this order passed by this authority shall be final and conclusive, it is saying shall be final and shall not be called in question in any court by way of appeal or revision, or in any original suit, application or execution proceeding. The jurisdiction of the civil court was therefore barred in the matter of sale. It is true that where the special tribunal or authority acts ultra vires or illegally, the civil court has, by virtue of section 9 of the CPC, power to interfere and set matters right, as was laid down by the Judicial Committee in AIR 1940, Privy Council 105. See, in several cases this is referred to. If the provisions of the statute have not been complied with, or the statutory tribunal has not acted in conformity with the fundamental principles of judicial procedure, the civil courts have jurisdiction to examine those cases. This rule was reiterated by the Supreme Court in State of Kerala versus Ramaswamy Iyer and others, AIR 1966, Supreme Court 1738. Next is a Constitution Bench decision. AIR 1964, Supreme Court 322. See the judges, Chief Justice of India, Justice B.P. Sinha, Justice Gajendra Gadkar, who wrote the judgment, Justice K.N. Vaju, Justice Hidayatullah, Justice J.C. Shah. How eminent judges are there. And the name of the case is Firm of Illuri Subbaiah Chetty, Illuri, ILLURI, Illuri Subbaiah Chetty and Sons versus State of AP. This is referred to in some other decisions which we have seen. Under the General Sales Tax Act, Madras, the question was, suit was filed by an assessee for recovery of a sum of money against the state on the ground that the said amount had been illegally recovered from him as a sales tax under the Madras General Sales Tax Act 1939. And the question was whether the suit is incompetent. Then other points are also considered. Then in discussion goes on in paragraphs 7 and 9 relevant for our purpose. It is therefore necessary to inquire into whether section 18A expressly or by necessary implication excludes the jurisdiction of the civil code. That is a question. 18A provides, what is 18A? 18A says that no suit or other proceeding shall, except as expressly provided in this act, be instituted in any court to set aside or modify any assessment made under this act. So it is not an act which completely excludes the jurisdiction of civil court under any circumstances. There are areas, as I pointed, under rent control legislation in our state, there may be so in other states also. There are certain areas where the civil court can, but there are certain areas where the civil court's jurisdiction impliedly stands excluded. So 18, no suit or other proceeding shall, except as expressly provided in this act, be instituted. So there is something. It is common ground that there is no express provision made in the act under which the present suit can be said to have been filed. So that is out. And so it falls under the prohibition contained. So it is that express area where express jurisdiction is there, or area where there is no exclusion of jurisdiction, that will not apply. The prohibition is express and unambiguous, and there can be no doubt on a fair construction of the section that a suit cannot be entertained by the civil court if by instituting the suit the plaintiff wants to set aside or modify any assessment made under the act. There is therefore no difficulty in holding that this section excludes the jurisdiction of the civil courts in respect of the suits covered by it. Para 9 is one or two sentences towards the middle. The fact that the order passed by the assessing authority may in fact be incorrect. This is important. This is an important thing. The fact that the order passed by the assessing authority may in fact be incorrect or wrong does not affect the position that in law the said order has been passed by an appropriate authority and the assessment made by it must be treated as made under this act. So the act provides that an authority is constituted. That authority has power to decide. It can decide it, and if that power is there, there is an exclusion. That means the authority can decide means it may happen that the decision may be wrong. Then that is to be corrected before the appellate authority, which is there under the act, under the scheme of the act. It is not to say that because the order is wrong, I can go before the civil court. No, it is not so. Whether or not an assessment has been made under this act will not depend on the correctness or the accuracy of the order passed by the assessing authority. Now, position is very clear. I will read it again. Whether or not an assessment has been made under this act will not depend on the correctness or accuracy of the order passed by the assessing authority. So, an order is passed by the assessing authority. It may be correct, it may be wrong, it may be partially correct, partially wrong. But that is not a ground to say that the civil court will have jurisdiction. Question is whether the civil court's jurisdiction is ousted. The correctness or otherwise of the decision of the authority under the special statute cannot be a ground to say that the civil court retains its power, jurisdiction. So that is so every decision is different in one sense or other. So with this we come to an end of this episode. Now I have to cite 2 or 3 decisions. Now I have to cite only 1 or 2 decisions, then we will start section 11. In the next episode itself, we will start section 11. So thank you very much.